Welcome to the Mind Rebel podcast, where each episode is a guided exploration or conversation designed to move you forward toward clarity, truth, and the wisdom within you that knows the way. I'm Taryn Watts, founder of the Mind Rebel Academy, home of the revolutionary Mind Rebel method, where we guide people through deep personal transformation programs and also train and support world-class coaches. I'm joined here by my dear friend and co-host, Theriault. We hope you enjoy this episode. In today's episode, we're going to guide you through one of my absolute favorite tools, and it's called the Growing Edge exercise. So this is a practice that you can return to again and again and again. This is one of my go-to practices, one that we've anchored into time after time after time. And it's especially useful when you're really clear on the vision of where you're going, but you still feel this gap between where you are today and where you desire to be in that vision. So what makes this exercise so powerful is that it goes beyond traditional just like action steps to, move you closer to your goal. So it goes beyond just identifying these action steps. It invites you to energetically close the gap. If you've listened to previous episodes in the past, you've probably heard me say once or twice that the quickest and most efficient way to close the gap between where you are today and where you want to be is to start showing up as the version of you who lives inside your vision today, despite current circumstances. So despite the fact that not all the pieces of your vision have come to fruition, the fastest way to get from here to there is to start embodying the version of you who already exists inside that vision right now, right here, inside the life you have today. So this exercise, this practice, really helps you to identify your unique growing edge and supports you in making conscious, aligned choices that move you towards your future starting right now. So it's a very simple framework, but a deep exploration that has absolutely changed the game for us. Before we dive into the exploration, I want you to know that we've created an accompanying digital workbook that's linked in the show notes of this episode. So this workbook is a series of inquiries and powerful questions that we've designed to really help guide you through this exercise. So if you are craving a more structured and supportive way to engage with this process, I highly recommend taking yourself through those questions. The best part of this is that this tool is something that you can return to again and again and again. Anytime you feel that there is this gap between where you are and where you desire to be, these questions and this exercise can help you really consciously and efficiently close that gap.
I think it's true what you said about this exploration, about this is a fantastic exploration. Anytime you have a gap between where you are now and where you know you want to be. Doesn't matter if it's a big gap, a small gap, a light one, a heavy one. It doesn't matter. As long as you have some idea about where it is you want to be, this is a great tool. This is a great exploration. However, when you are sort of searching for a tool you might need, an exercise that might support you in the moment, one thing to sort of be aware of is that I find this particular exercise brings me the most clarity when I'm not really in the depths of really intense emotion. It's not to say it doesn't work, but a couple weeks ago, as you know, we tried to take ourselves through this episode and record this podcast, but I had so much emotion that I needed to feel and process, and I felt so heavy. And I did the exploration and I actually got things out of it, but the flavor of it was so different than what I got out of it, this time, 2 weeks later. This time I came out with real clarity and a real solid sense of being able to put my finger right on the core of what is the energetic gap? Who do I need to be? How do I close that gap? This time when I did it without the really intense emotion, gosh, I was able to walk away feeling so clear and so empowered and so sure. And when I had, a ton of emotion that I needed to feel and process, it's not what I got out of it. It maybe helped me start taking some steps to process some emotion and see some things. But, you said to me, you probably would have been better served by like a name it, feel it, shift it exercise. And I think that's really true. So that's one thing to be, to keep in mind. Not that it wouldn't work if you're feeling intense emotion. Most days of the week, I'm feeling emotion to some degree or another, but I do find this one works better when you have like a little bit of an even keel, even if our emotions are present.
Yeah. And the other thing is this exercise works really well when you do also have a clear vision for where you're going. If you don't know what it is you want or where it is you want to go or what like your heart most deeply yearns for, this is probably not going to be a super useful exercise either. So these explorations are meant to like guide you inward. They're meant to be fun and juicy and invite you inward to dig into yourself to come up with the clarity that you need in whatever area of life that you're looking at. And to your point, Michelle, when we were trying to record this episode 2 weeks ago, we even took you through step 1, which was to reflect on all the growth you've done, in the past. Like you weren't even able to access that. It was like, no, it was like doom and gloom. There's been no growth. No. And it was like very clear to me as an observer that, okay, this particular exercise, this particular tool is not the right tool for you right now. It's not the right exploration. This is not accessible to you right now. And what you really needed was like space to process your emotions of the heavy feelings you were feeling. And so if you're ever feeling that way, put this exercise down. Don't throw it away completely. Put it down for now. Reach for another exploration or another tool or another support mechanism and come back to this when you're feeling ready and connected to the vision of where it is you want to go. So we'll move through the growing edge exercise together. There are 5 steps in total, and each one is designed to help you close that gap, not just through action, but energetically through choices, through intention, through embodiment of who it is that we want to be inside of our vision. So I'm going to walk us through each step, sharing a little bit about, what that step is, what it means, why it matters. And then Michelle and I will share what came up for us as we explored each step. And we're sharing our internal process just to simply model what this looks like in action in hopes that it will be of service to you listening to it. Even though we know the way we process it, what we put our finger on the growing edge, what our vision is so unique to us. And you're going to come up with different solutions. You're going to come up with different answers. But we just really wanted to show you what this looks like in practice. When we think about the traditional modes of closing the gap from here to there, it's really easy to jump ahead and want to take action and come to solutions really, really fast, especially when we feel a sense of discomfort in our gap or a sense of urgency to close the gap fast. But what I want to say here is that moving fast isn't the same as moving efficiently. So fast can be reactive. It can be surface level. It can be disconnected from our deeper truth. Whereas efficiency is about really aligned momentum. And efficiency comes from taking the time to tune inward and to understand what's really driving or motivating our behaviors, our choices, our decisions and actions, and even questioning that and unpacking that and peeling that back and examining it to ensure that we're making intentional choices from a very aligned place. So when I say this is the most efficient way to close the gap from here to there, that's what I mean. This is about efficiency and not speed. In fact, what you're going to notice is like the time it takes to actually take yourself through this exploration can be hours. I think I've spent hours in a sitting. Sometimes I have to come back to it in this exploration. Sometimes it's been quicker, but when I'm exploring a deep gap, this is a journal exercise I spend hours doing. But that time devoted to this exploration ensures that our steps are efficient steps and not fast steps that are just like burning energy, oftentimes in the wrong direction. So I always like to imagine that the path from here to there, like I imagine a literal path in this like beautiful winding forest. And when I take the time to do this inward work, whether it's a exercise to get clearer on my vision or an exercise like this one to identify what the growing edge is, doesn't matter what the exercise is. But when I do this work and I take the time to do this work, then every step I take on this path is intentional and efficient and the best use of my energy and my capacity. Whereas when I don't do this internal work, I might be like running down the path, but I'm like, am I on the path? Am I on the detoured route in the bushes? Which is what I'm often on when I don't take the time to check in with myself through these exercises. So this is about efficiency and not fast, quick action.
When I take myself through an exercise like this now, I actually really love to dedicate a whole day to this. I dedicated a day to this time. And I don't want to make this exercise feel or sound inaccessible to someone who feels like, I don't have a day. I don't have time. I'm feeling busy. And I'm not saying it has to be that. I'm not saying you need to carve out a whole day to make this good. 5 minutes of contemplation while you're listening. It's like every little bit of thought and attention and turning inward that you give to yourself returns the rewards of like clarity and alignment. So 5 minutes is worthwhile, 10 minutes is worthwhile. But I really like a day to this exercise because, to your point, it might seem like I don't have a day to spend on something like this. But what I've really, really seen is that if I don't take a luxurious amount of time or a day or whatever time I need to do this, exercise like this to the point where I get to the heart of it, I like spend enough time and energy that I figure this out and I walk away with awareness that makes me feel so expansive. If I don't do that, I can pretty much guarantee that I will spend weeks or months out of alignment, kind of like being busy, taking a lot of action in a slightly off route direction that I'm going to have to just like abandon when I come back into alignment anyway. Every to-do list that I've written and begun to execute while I was operating out of a little bit of like fear or just out of alignment without the clarity I needed has been way more wasted time, energy, money in my life that this avoids. I wholeheartedly agree that this is actually not only efficient, but there's so much more ease here. I love the feeling that the more I tune in to like an exercise like this or similar exercises, I love the feeling that I'm actually getting to shed a whole lot of the wasted energy and effort and challenges that I otherwise would if I was just blindly trying to close the gap through unaligned action.
It seems super counterintuitive, but this is actually like the antidote to busyness, because oftentimes busyness is coming from misaligned places. It's coming from what we think we should do or what we think is a priority or what we think is important with our incredibly busy lives. And this is the carving out time, luxurious time to inwardly reflect is the antidote to busyness. So that's why this internal work matters so much. When we move from like that chaotic busyness or that kind of action-oriented busyness, our actions become really powerful, intentional, purposeful, and that makes us wildly magnetic to what it is that we actually truly want in our lives. So let's move through each of these steps one by one. Okay, so step one. Step one is all about reflecting on where you've been. So we're going to start by looking backwards. So this step is all about recognizing your evolution. So honoring how far you've come, honoring what you've released, what has already shifted within you, the growth that you've achieved, we often move forward without fully seeing the ways that we've grown in the past. And there's a danger that if we skip this part, we risk building a future that doesn't acknowledge the strength and the wisdom that we've already worked hard to embody. And so we want to start here because we're also looking at what we've gained. So not just the gap of how far we have to go, but like what's been gained, and really kind of celebrate the growth that has been gained up into this point. So the invitation is for you to choose a time frame in your past that feels meaningful to you. There's no rules around this. It could be a month ago, it could be 6 months ago, a year ago, maybe even more. And choose a time frame and take a few moments here to reflect on who you were then compared to who you are today. Think about, what did life look like during that time? What were you doing? What was your life experience like? What defined your experience both internally and externally? So take some time to put your finger on that time frame and go back and reflect on that. And let this be a moment to really like bear witness to what's shifted inside of you, what you've released, what you've outgrown, and maybe even like the quiet ways in which you've already changed and evolved along your journey.
And if this step sounds boring to you or not useful to you, or you want to skip it or skip past this part, it probably means this is like extra important for you. I wanted to skip this part. I thought it was almost like there's a part of my mind that doesn't intuitively feel or see the power in naming the gain, the growth, how far I've already come. There's a part of my mind that sees it as like just trying to like flatter myself or make myself feel more positive or pat myself on the back or something that feels a little artificial. And my brain struggles to see that there's something really important here and I would like to skip over it. And 2 weeks ago, when we did this exercise, not only was I in a very heavy emotional state, but I would have skipped it if the accountability of having this conversation wasn't there and I was just alone in my living room. I might have skimmed this with a couple lines. And when I did it this time and truly did it, I had big revelations. So just please do whatever you have to do. If you want to skip it, just don't. Just try not to. Just if you want to skip it like I did, you probably need this step more than you realize.
When we think about journeys of growth, growth really doesn't just live in what's next. It lives in the steps we've already taken. It's like pulling ourselves out and looking at that big picture. And the other thing it does is it shows us, like proves to us that growth is happening. It's possible. Like, look at how far we've come. Look at how far you've come in whatever time frame that you choose. If you can do that, you can do this. Like, you've got what it takes to close the gap that's in front of you. There's another danger in the world of having great big visions and moving towards these visions and energetically closing the gap. And that danger is that you can be always looking towards the future and always looking towards what's the gap right in front of me. And so this exercise of looking at the gain counterbalances that and brings like a more holistic lens of the actual journey that we're on, because really life is happening in the journey. Life is not happening when we reach the destination. I know that sounds so corny. You hear that all the time, but it's actually really, really true. And this piece of the puzzle, by looking at that gain, creates a more balanced approach to reaching for our dreams. So for me, doing this exercise, I spent a good deal of time here because it's been a while, it's been a minute since I really looked at the gain. I want to share some context about our gain and kind of the journey we've been on, keeping in mind that we visit this exercise regularly. So we've been in like multiple iterations of this exercise. But ultimately, when I was thinking about the gain and the time frame that I selected was about 2 years ago. And so I feel like to really answer this, I have to kind of paint a picture of where we were 2 years ago, as a business. I'm going to share a little bit about where I was personally. And then Michelle, I'd love for you to share about where you were, because our growing edge is so interconnected because we're building a vision that has to do with the MRA, that we're building this together, really. So our growing edge is so interconnected here. So to give you a little bit more context, the MRA has always been this creation that was birthed from my soul. I always say this is a soul-led business. And the craft of coaching, so even before the MRA came to be, I was a coach and I had a personal, coaching business. And coaching itself, the actual craft of coaching, was like tailor-made for my being. It's this beautiful craft that is so in alignment with who I am when I am coaching someone or I'm teaching coaching skills. I'm in pure alignment. And I've used the skills of a coach and the self-coaching tools that I've gained throughout the years to build this business, like this one, like the growing edge exercise. I use this to build a business. And that's why I have been so content with the creation of the Mind Rebel Academy. It's also why the MRA has been so successful and has seen so much success. But I shouldn't say but, I should say and over time, things that were once in complete alignment started to fall out of sync. So what happened as the MRA grew is life got really, 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 really busy. And somewhere along the way, in very, very sneaky ways, my guard. So for those of you who don't know the Mind Rebel method and, what we teach inside of our flagship program, we work with personas inside of us. So we work with a persona around our authentic self, who we truly are. And we also work with another persona called our guard. So the part of us that wants to protect us and prove something and is protecting a very fearful and vulnerable part of us that we call a rebel mind. So that's just a very, very quick overview of our personas. But what I found was that somewhere along the way in building a business and running a business, my guard in very sneaky ways started to step in really tiny micro decisions and subtle choices that didn't feel like much in the moment. But over time, as they started to build, it slowly pulled me off course. And what was happening inside of me is that my internal joy and love and satisfaction for what I was doing, there was like this disconnect happening inside of me. So I'll just give you one really simple example of what I mean by this to just show how sneaky and how tricky the guard can be and how it can pull us off course ever so slightly. So years ago, when I first started the MRA, I used to love doing live workshops, live retreats. When COVID hit, it more became virtual workshop, virtual retreats. And the MRA was actually built that way. So people would come to these events, feel the power of the work, and they would want more. And so they would join our programs. But over time, I started to notice how drained and how depleted I felt after live events. And it might be because I'm getting older. I am getting way more introverted as I get older. But instead of like attuning to myself and attuning to my body and attuning to like the shifts that were happening inside of me, my guard kicked into high gear and told me to push through because that's what you do. This is how you build a business. This is how it works. Just do it. Ignore your body's screams and just keep going. So for a couple years, that's what I would do. My guard would kick in and force me to do things like, this is just like one of many little examples. But over time, my body was starting to speak to me in like louder and louder ways. And that disconnect was getting louder and louder and louder. I remember the last live event I did, I was bawling my eyes out before the event. And not because there was anything wrong with it, but because there was a disconnect with the way I wanted to market, the way I wanted to serve. It felt like this was something I had to do and not something I wanted to do. And I remember saying, this feels like I'm being vicious to myself by forcing myself over and over and over again to do these things that we're no longer feeling aligned to me. And so could be a whole other podcast episode, Michelle, but there is a difference between building your internal capacity to do something and your body screaming, no, this is not the way anymore. And I've spent a lot of years discerning those two feelings inside. What I've learned is that when something terrifies your mind, but stirs your soul inside, that's the invitation to lean in and build capacity to do something and to like show up or to get on that stage or write that book or do that thing. But that's very different than when your body is just screaming no, and there's no more excitement, or there never was excitement, or there's no excitement. Two very different feelings that you need to be very honest with yourself to get to the heart of. So coming back to this exercise, when I was thinking about my time frame, I was coming back to the time in my life where that was the reality. Body screaming, no, don't do this anymore, in multiple different ways. And yet my guard, was just so strong and just wanting to really protect me. My guard was coming in and work harder, do more. Nope, you can rest when you're retired. No, it's not time for that. No, you cannot build a business without being incredibly visible. That's not even an option for you. And so it was this internal dialogue that if I wasn't so committed to self-examination, could have gone on for way longer than it did. But there was a true turning point. This turning point happened collectively between you and I, Michelle, because you were, going through your own process of desiring change in the area of vocation. And at the time, we were creating this new program called the Vocation Incubator. And we really built this program because it was the exact exploration that we most needed. The premise of this exploration was, could our truest and most honest alignment in vocation actually be the portal to our most wild and abundant success? That's the heart of the Vocation Incubator. And part of me, especially even when we were creating that, part of me knew the answer was yes. Like, of course, like intellectually, I believe that. I have lived that truth in so many other areas of my life. I live that truth in my marriage, in motherhood and friendships and community. When I show up as my most authentic self, I am met with so much love, so much support, so much ease in all these other areas. But the question was, could that also be true in every other aspect of business that my guard has just like wanted to take the wheel on so desperately over the years? And so that was the question. And the journey we've been on since then has absolutely changed everything. Again, when I was doing this exercise and looking at the gain, it gave me an opportunity to really reflect on all that growth and all of that unpacking. We started to unpack every old belief and every paradigm that was subconsciously, unconsciously working in the background around what does it mean to work? What does it mean to exchange work for time? What does it mean to exchange work for money? What does success mean to us? And so we did the uncomfortable inner work of examining and releasing and then consciously rewriting what we now believe to be true with every ounce of our being, which is that our most honest alignment is the portal to our most abundant and prosperous success. So after all that internal work came the external work So we looked at, oh my goodness, we looked at every single part of the MRA. We looked at roles, programs, strategies, communications, marketing, even beautiful things like, the live events that were really impacting people's lives, like even beautiful things. We had to ask ourselves, is this still in alignment for us? And if not this, then what? The reason I'm painting this picture is because this work, we've been deep in this work for almost a year now. And this work was slow and intentional, like devotional. If I could choose one word to describe this work, it is devotional. It wasn't quick. It wasn't glamorous. In fact, there was absolutely nothing glamorous about this process. Since the MRA's inception, we have experienced enormous success and growth year over year. But in order to actually do this work and do this work with the level of devotion and intention that we desired for ourselves, we had to pause growth completely. We pushed back new programs, new cohorts. We paused all sorts of projects we had been working on. We stopped all marketing efforts so that we could give ourselves the gift of this space to do this exploration, to do this work, and to give it the space that it deserved. And, to make that even possible financially, I, as the business owner, I had to stop paying myself for a good amount of time to make this space, make this room. And that had all sorts of impacts in my personal life and my family life. But that's how devoted we have been to this process. And looking back, like being able to look back at this and look back at the last year of this journey we've been on, this time has been the greatest gift I have ever given myself. The time to reflect, the time to release, the time to reimagine and get so clear about what it is that I want to create now, right? And really at the heart of it, I wanted to shift from a business that I had created that relied so heavily on me and my energy and my face being out there. And I wanted to shift from that to one that could live well beyond me. Like, I want the MRA to live on well after I leave this earth. And so the vision for a business like that is very different than the vision for what I had built. So to have this time, to have done all this messy, unglamorous, unsexy work has been truly the greatest gift I've ever given myself. And that's the deep inner work and the journey that we've been on to date. Literally, that's what brings us here today. And that's what that reflection allowed me to really pause and go, whoa, wow, we've been on a journey.
When you tell that story and you share about the journey and really the gain, all of the growth we've already had to date on this particular journey, I can sit back and kind of revel in it and go, wow, oh, look at how far we've come. But I want to share my first, 2 weeks ago when I tried to reflect on the gain. I want to share what I saw as the gain in that moment. And then I'll tell you what I saw as the gain, when I did this week. In the wrong frame of mind to really do this, what I came up with when I looked over, I picked a year and a half, by the way, as my time frame to look back on. And I looked back over the past year and a half to where I am today. And the only gain and growth I saw was that, well, I thought I haven't accomplished everything I've want to accomplish. And I don't even know if I've grown. But one thing I can do right now is really clearly name what I don't like. And I was like, well, that's my growth. I started off vaguely knowing that I didn't like something, and now I can really name what I don't like. And that was truly the only thing I could grasp that felt true, which is kind of crazy because when I did it this week and I thought back over the past year and a half, I was like, oh my God. A year and a half ago, I remember a very particular day that stands out in my mind that I was walking in the woods and I remember looking at the moon, and I remember not only I like a combination of praying and declaring to the moon and the universe, that's it. There is this vague possibility for what work and vocation could be. And it's something more that's happening now. It's some reality where not just parts of my authentic self are coming through, but every part of my authentic self is coming through. I am not compromising in any way. It's like the full me, my full expression. And it's like, it's going to feel like this. And maybe it could be like this, but it was a vague impression. And I just declared it. And I was like, I want that. I want to take a chance on it. And then I think about all of the moments over the past year and a half where either we've gone out on a crazy limb and made like an undoable choice that honored moving in this direction. I think about the smaller moments where we were still in so much fear and so much self-doubt, but somehow we kept walking forward every single day anyway for a year and a half. You know, we didn't give up on it. And I think about that type of like resilience and devotion we anchored into. And then I think about all of like the beautiful, actually, before I tell about the beautiful reforming, I think about all of the shedding and the releasing. Oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
The bravery and the openness and the trust that we released the biggest things to the smallest things. I look back now and I think, we are incredible. I can't believe we were that willing to surrender and let so much go, despite the fear of like, what will we be left with? But we did it. And then from this like beautiful blank slate of pure alignment, started planting seeds and reforming things. And now I see the way all of that's been shaping up. And I look at it and I'm like, oh, this is beautiful. I see my dreams coming true. And I hear all of that reflected in your reflection over the past 2 years. And that feels so important to touch. So thank God I didn't stop it like 2 weeks ago when I came in with the heavy emotion. I'm like, the only thing is that I can name what's bad really clearly. I'm like, holy smokes, your frame of mind trying to paint that makes such a huge difference. And sure, things have changed in 2 weeks, but not that much, you know? That felt so nourishing to start this exercise off with, really, actually, honestly being able to see, you know, whatever starting point we choose, to be able to honestly and accurately see the growth that's already happened. Because that feels way different. Feeling like we've got a year and a half of aligned momentum under our belts feels way different than pretending right now is ground zero and you're starting from scratch to get from where you are to where you want to go. That's way different. Being able to harness that momentum in moving forward feels like night and day when I think about closing the rest of the gap.
Yeah, it also makes me go, oh gosh, thank God that's over. Because some of those choices, the depths of that exploration was profound and challenging and emotional and wow. I just feel grateful for our past selves for actually having done the work. And now from here, looking at the gap, even though there's still a gap, we're still moving towards something that's powerful.
Yeah.
That gain is powerful.
And can I just say, you know, when we did this exercise a year ago or a year and a half ago, I just want to like acknowledge, like, if you're stepping on to the beginning of a new journey and you see a huge gap from where you are today and where you want to be, and you don't feel like there is any gain because you've just started, there is still a gain that can come from other places. Like, I remember when we began this journey, the growth and the gain and the evidence from the past that I was pulling on was from different areas of my life.
Yes.
So even though we were heading out in this realm of like alignment in vocation and work and being abundant and successful in this like aligned, authentic energy, one thing that I really pulled on was that I have done something really similar in the realm of relationship. Had nothing to do with work, had nothing to do with money, but I could remember back to the times where I decided to choose alignment for myself in an area and be devoted to it, even though people around me were saying, you're asking too much. You're unreasonable. You're needy. You're whatever. But I decided to be devoted anyway. I can remember early on in this journey really calling on that. And I thought of that as my gain at the beginning. Like, I've done this over here. I can see the way I was devoted to myself and my own alignment there. And that was momentum to bring into the beginning of this journey.
Yeah, I love that. Right now at this step, the invitation is to maybe even just like pause this, take a big breath, and think about your gain. Think about what's already changed for you. Even if it hasn't been loud or obvious, what's your time frame? What has shifted? What has changed? And sink into the energy of your gain before we move on to step 2 here. All right. For those who are ready, we're going to move on to step 2 here. So step 2 is to take an honest inventory of where you are today. We've looked at our past. We've looked at our gain. Now it's our time to root in the present moment. So this step is all about honest, compassionate awareness of where we are today. So it's an invitation to meet yourself right where you are without judgment. We're not trying to fix or change anything here. We're just trying to simply name what's true about where we are. Take a big breath and take stock and reflect on, what does your life look and feel like right now? How are you spending your days? How do you carry yourself in the world? How do you show up in the world? That's really the heart of the question. How do you show up in the world? How do you show up in your relationships, in your work, in your decision-making? How do you show up for yourself? So taking a really honest inventory of how you show up in the world today, and let yourself name what's here, both what feels aligned and what might feel out of sync.
I think the most important thing about this step, about naming where you are today, is honesty with yourself. There are a surprising number of moments I've found where I have some sort of inclination to not be honest with myself, either about, I found myself resisting being honest about actually how bad I felt. And I found myself being dishonest about all of the good things and all of the good ways I've been showing up. And I just think the most essential thing about this step is that honesty. And notice if you have an inclination to like sugarcoat things and paint like a more lovely picture, or notice if you have an inclination to really be extra pessimistic about yourself, how you're showing up, how you're feeling. I've noticed both in myself, and allowing yourself to be slightly dishonest and like lean one way or another won't serve you as well. It's not going to be as powerful when you are trying to close the gap. If you don't name the real things that are actually like, oh, this isn't so good. I don't feel good here. Here's a tightness here. Here's how I'm showing up here. I'm not proud of. If you don't name that, you're never going to get the opportunity to identify the gap to where you want to go. And if you are perhaps too pessimistic or hard on yourself, or like I was 2 weeks ago, just maybe in a really heavy emotional state where you couldn't see what was good, then you're also not going to be able to powerfully close the gap. It was harder for me to find the most important thread when I thought I've hardly made any progress. You know, where I am today is this lack and this lack and this fear and this constriction. That was a lot of fog that didn't really help me see and put my finger on the heart of how to close that energetic gap later on in the later steps. Coming in balanced and honest is the actual most powerful way to approach this step.
I think this point you're making about being honest with yourself was a hard one for me for years, because on so many levels, the MRA has been birthed from my soul, you know, and so many aspects of this work is so in alignment. And then there are these little corners that were out of alignment, and untangling that and unpacking that was very, very confusing. And I think there were probably times where I did this inventory where I wasn't ready to admit to myself that there were unaligned corners here, because oh gosh, admitting that to myself meant that something had to change. And there was a time where I literally could not conceive of a world where I didn't have to do the things I didn't like to be able to do the things I love here. I couldn't conceive of a world, like I didn't have a model for what that looked like. My brain literally could not imagine it. So it limited my view and it limited my thinking. And so being honest with myself was challenging to get to. And so I think what happened was over time, the discomfort became louder and louder and louder as I allowed my guard to pull me in these directions, and my body started screaming in louder and louder ways until I was just like, I can't ignore these feelings I have anymore. It's like robbing my joy from the things I actually love to do here. It had to get to a point where those internal screams became so loud that I was willing to be honest with myself because the stakes were so high. It's not like I was in a job that I want to get out of and I hate. This is the job of my dreams. This was a past vision fully manifest, you know? And so I think it was like just extra layers of complication and internal battling I had to do to truly be honest with myself that things were changing. So step 2, take inventory of where you are today. What is real and true for you right now? How do you show up in the world? So the step invites you into that honest self-awareness without judgment, just like gentle truth telling, even if it's just to yourself. Like no one else in the whole wide world needs to know yet. But truth telling starts with telling yourself the truth and being honest with yourself. What does your life actually look and feel like today? How are you showing up in the world? What's alive in your body, in your voice, in your choices? So that's the exploration to take inventory of where you are today. That's step 2. Step 3. So we've looked at the gain. We've looked at the past. We've looked at the gain. We've taken an honest inventory of where we are today. Step 3 is to look out into the future, look out towards that vision for your life, and anchor into this next expression of you. So this is where we expand into possibility. You're invited to imagine here, and more importantly, like feel into the version of you that lives the life you're moving toward. So not a fantasy self, not a made up imaginary self, but the most resonant and aligned version of you, the one who feels steady, who feels true, who feels honest, who feels deeply at home in themselves in this new version of reality that they have landed inside of. So I want you to literally imagine yourself stepping into that energy, stepping into that reality. So put yourself in the heart at the center of your vision. And so sometimes this is helpful to actually just first, before you even focus on how you're showing up here, focus on maybe, okay, what is true about your world here? What's happening in your life? What are you doing? Who are you surrounded by? What do the external circumstances look like? And then orient inward and imagine how you move through the world in that version of your life. How do you speak? How do you lead, whether you're leading yourself or leading others? How do you love? What qualities are present in your energy? What does life feel like when you live from that space? If you're doing this without the guided reflections in the digital workbook, just allow yourself to name all sorts of things that are coming up for you. And the heart of the question is, who are you being in this next version of reality?
I love this step. This, in some ways, is my, I don't want to say favorite step, but I love this step. And in some ways, this step is the easiest for me to sink into. But I'm also aware that for some people, this could be a really hard, challenging step, especially if you haven't already spent a lot of time imagining the future vision that you want for yourself, for your entire life, or for whatever area you're focusing on when you're doing this exercise. And one of the reasons that I found a lot of ease in doing this step is because in the MRA, we spend a lot of time creating these visions for our lives, our entire lives, or, particular pieces of our lives. And I continue to work on this vision statement year after year after year. So right now, my starting place for this exercise, I have this beautiful vision that I have poured my heart and soul and tears, like my aching heart, into. And so that made it real. That was such a support in doing this. I was able to pull up my vision statement, and I actually, I didn't actually focus on the entire thing. I focused on the beautiful little section that came out of exploring vocation and abundance and, everything that this theme is for me right now. And I pulled that up and I reread it and I used it as a tool to reconnect to that energy and then start imagining how I'm showing up in that vision. And I don't want to make it seem like that's how prepared you have to be to do this, because I don't think that's true at all. I think in any single moment, you have the ability to tap into yourself and your desires and call on a picture of, the vision you want for your life. And you always have access to your own desires and your intuition and visions and creativity. So you can always do it. I just will say, if you do find this step a challenge, and you sense that there's more to get clear here, like there could be. I think about how many hours I've spent piecing together and capturing this vision, and then also shedding things and adding in new things and refining it. Oh my gosh, I've poured countless hours, and every hour is so worth it. And I treasure this vision statement. And so if you don't already have one, and you feel like there's more here to see, like just the invitation to start. A vision statement could start with one sentence, one beautiful sentence about the life you want to live or what you want this area of your life to look like. And it could grow to 5 paragraphs, whatever it is. But I just find actually having a written down vision so helpful to get to pull up and touch and read and feel into, and then start imagining myself in. And that made this section so rich and juicy for me. I think there's one other super important thing about imagining a vision for your future and imagining who you're going to be in that vision, is that the mind can create a vision, and then your whole body, heart, and soul can create a vision. And it's so important that it's not just your mind creating a vision that will soothe fears and solve problems that's not actually deeply aligned to you, but it's so easy for that to happen. There have been moments where I've imagined pieces of my vision that were almost like I imagined them as solutions to problems. And it was just the only solution my mind could conceive of, or the easiest solution my mind could conceive of at the time. For example, years ago when I was imagining the vision for my ultimate financial success, it was like, okay, what do I really want? Well, I want this much money, and maybe I want this type of security, and whatever else. I can remember a vision my mind started painting at one point for what that would look like. And then I think about who I needed to be in that vision. And when I felt into it, even then, I think I got a tightness in my stomach, but I still hung on to that vision for a bit because I was like, it makes sense to my mind. But it's so important that the vision actually feels good to your body. If you paint a picture of success or love or whatever it is, parenting, if you paint a vision for any piece of your life that also makes your stomach tighten, investigate that. Just because a vision is, somebody else's version of success or somebody else's vision of the life they want to live. And maybe even if it makes sense to your mind, or maybe even if it's just, something you've held on for a long time, check in if you also feel in your body feelings of either joy or softening and relief or excitement or awe or wonder. Those corresponding feelings when imagining your vision or who you're being are essential. If that's not there and instead you feel tightness or constriction or a bending or something, that is a sign to pull back a little bit and try to connect with a picture of your life that brings the type of like beautiful feelings you most want your body to feel in your everyday life.
Those are the visions that our souls hold for us. And when we tap into those visions, oh, life gets powerful. When we tap into that vision, that's the same vision that like life wants for us. And when we get into alignment with the vision that our souls and like life wants for us, that is the energy where life can split oceans and move mountains to bring us to where we're meant to be. And that's what we're talking about. And if you're listening to this and you're like, I have no idea where to start, this is what our flagship program, the Mind Rebel Method, is all about in a nutshell. If you want devoted, beautiful space to be held for you through this exploration and a systematic journey, the Mind Rebel Method will invite you on that journey and really hold your hand through that process every step of the way.
Taryn, is there anything you want to share about the vision that you connected to when you did this step?
So I've got my little notebook where I did all my journal reflections here. One thing I will share is that there are times where when I'm doing this step, the way I'm showing up, ultimately what this step is doing is it's after we've completed this step, it reveals to us the true energetic gap between here and there. So sometimes when I do this exercise and I tap into this future state of myself, there is a big energetic gap. There is like things I'm saying where I'm like, I am showing up confident. I am showing up completely self-expressed. I am showing up fully in alignment in these areas. And sometimes the energetic gap that I feel based on step 2 and step 3, how I'm showing up today and how I'm showing up in the vision, is vast. There's a big gap. And sometimes there's not. And so when I did it this time in this particular instance, what was interesting is that there wasn't a big gap. And that's really exciting because what that tells you when there's not a big gap is that the distance from here to there is shrinking. Like the work you've been doing is working and the distance from here to there is shrinking. And your way of being shows up first. And then your outer circumstances begin to rearrange and realign. And the things in your vision, the things outside of you, begin to manifest into your experience. And so as I was doing this exercise, I was realizing that, wow, I've been working so hard at this gap that there's not a big gap right now. And I'm starting to see the manifestations coming in and the things in my vision arriving. And not that it's all here yet, but it was just a reminder of keep doing the work, keep putting one foot in front of the other, and keep showing up in the ways that I want to show up in the world. There were still little corners that I realized that I could be like embodying this version of myself in even greater ways, but the gap really didn't feel very large in this instance. In the past, and I'm sure in future iterations of this, there's felt like large space in between how I was showing up today versus, how I want to be in my vision. But no matter where you are, no matter how big the gap is, there's really valuable and important information here for us.
So for anyone who feels a really massive gap between who you're being today and who you want to be in that vision of your life, it doesn't have to be a daunting thing. It actually doesn't mean, oh, you have years to go and, like a long journey ahead. It doesn't automatically mean that. Because we're talking about who you're being, there's actually nothing or no one who controls or has power over who you choose to be in a moment. The distance between who you're showing up as today to who you want to show up as in your vision, the distance is 100% under your control. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying just snap your fingers and be that version of you. It is not as simple as that. However, you have so much control over your choice of who you choose to be moment to moment. And another little bit of encouragement. 2 weeks ago, the gap for me between who I felt I was being and who I wanted to be just felt so demoralizing. To me, it looked like a mountain that would take me years to climb. And 2 weeks later, I'm kind of feeling like you, Taryn. I'm like, oh, I'm being her a lot. There's the little tweaks over here, but I'm being her. The difference can look huge, but sometimes you're just like one really good cry away from embodying a big,
True.
yeah, like a big piece, or like one intense journal sessions of like, oh, allowing yourself to feel your fears. Like sometimes a journal session and a big cry away from stepping into that new version of you. Try not to gauge the distance you have to go to close the gap entirely on, yeah, how much of a gap you feel in that moment.
Okay, so once again, step 3 is to anchor into that future version of yourself. What does that future version of you feel like? Let yourself try that on. You're invited to step into the version of you that already lives and exists inside this vision. Not a fantasy, but your most aligned, your most alive and integrated self. So what does life feel like here? How do you move? How do you speak? How do you lead? How do you interact with those you love, lead, and serve? How do you make decisions? How do you make choices? So really think about and let yourself go. Let your pen move. Let yourself just completely imagine who you are being in that vision. Okay, let's move on to step 4. So we've looked at the past. We've taken inventory of where we are. We've looked towards the future. And now we're trying to identify your unique growing edge. So now we're looking at that stretch, the space between where you are today and where it is that you're going. This is where your growing edge lives. And in this step, we're really going to work to put our finger on that edge and really name it and really identify what this growing edge is so that we can consciously make choices and decisions and actions to close that gap as it relates to our unique growing edge. I'm just going to say it again and again and again until it really sinks in. The most potent and powerful and magnetic way to close the gap from where you are today to where you desire to be in your vision is to begin showing up as that version of you today, despite current circumstances. So by doing this work of naming our growing edge, we can really lean hard into that growing edge, and we can bring into the light our area of focus, and we can challenge ourselves to make choices and decisions and actions that are in alignment with that new version of ourselves that already lives inside of our vision. And that invites us to let go of old ways of being that are keeping us really energetically stuck in that old reality. So take a moment to tune into that gap, that stretch in front of you. What no longer fits? Maybe it's old beliefs, outdated roles, old ways of being that feel constricted or too small or just don't energetically match where it is that you're going. And then look into what is calling you forward. What are you being invited to embody more of? What are you ready to release so that you can embody more of that? This exploration is an opportunity to name it, to give shape to your growing edge. And maybe there's a word or a phrase or a theme or maybe an image that comes to you that really captures the essence of this gap. It doesn't have to be perfect. It really just has to be honest. And I love giving my growing edges a theme because it becomes this tool that I can call on when I'm going to make choices and decisions and actions. Like if my theme is true, authentic leadership, and I know what that means to me, then when I'm faced with challenges or decisions to make in my everyday life, I can anchor into this growing edge because I put my finger on it. Ooh, if I was in my authentic leadership right now, what choice would I make? What would I say here? What decision would I take? What brave action would I anchor into? And so that's the power of naming your growing edge, because it informs your decisions, choices, and next steps, which is coming in step 5 of this process. But right now, it's all about putting our finger on what is the theme of your growing edge. Is there a word? Is there a phrase? Is there an image that really can capture the essence of what you're stepping into?
For me to get to this theme actually took a lot of work and a lot of iterations. So when I first started trying to feel this gap between, okay, here's where I am today, here's where I want to be, what's the heart of this gap, this growing edge, and put my finger on it, I could see so many things I wanted to let go of. I could see so many things I wanted to embrace. I could see patterns that I wanted to change, but there felt like a lot of them. So I actually had to do this in a lot of steps. I started with just like a brainstorm on an actual piece of paper, writing all of these little things I could see just around the page to see them all in one place, like the things I was letting go of, the things I was embracing. There's even some words that would jump out at me. Like, I think this is something to do with power. I just put them all there. And from there, I was looking for connections and themes, like themes or words or connections that would make sense of a bunch of these different ideas at once. And so the next thing that I did was I started writing little phrases to try to connect some of these words together, which was great. But still, there was like 5 phrases. And then I had to step back again and look at these 5 phrases and what's the essence like of all of these? What do they really have in common? And only then could I put my finger on, okay, here's the theme that really describes all of this. It took me a good amount of openness and creativity and like willingness to continue exploring without clarity jumping out at me instantly. I really had to massage this one. And I really had to embrace a little bit of extra curiosity here to have the patience for that theme to emerge.
Yeah. And other times it can emerge like that, So there's no right or wrong way to experience this exploration. But when you put your finger on the growing edge and you name the name or name the theme, or maybe it's a phrase, or maybe it's whatever it is for you, it should feel like, oh, yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing that I want to embody more of, or that's the thing, that's the way of being that I'm stepping into. It should feel like exciting, powerful. It might scare you a little bit. That energy of it might terrify your mind, but stir your soul. But it should feel that powerful to varying degrees. Michelle, do you want to share your growing edge?
Sure. I wrote it as, I am capable and worthy of receiving what I desire. It's funny because this is not an unexpected growing edge. It's something I've actually named before that when I finally circled back to it, I went, well, that makes sense. But it really holds the energy of what you're saying. Like there's energy there. When I feel into that, there's a part of me that it just feels good to, and I believe. It's actually something that I've touched before and leaned into before, stepped into before. So it's the part of it that just feels like, yes, this is good. This is true. And I'm going to step into this. But when I'm really honest with myself, this growing edge, when I think about living this and embodying it every day and in all of the moments, I can really see like how stretchy this is for me sometimes. I have so many moments in my life where I subconsciously doubt this, in any moment where someone is pushing back against my desires, saying they're too much, unreasonable, their desires are the opposite and I should compromise, or just the world isn't showing me examples of like people who have the same desires as me, who are getting them fulfilled. There's so many moments where I walk around going, oh, is that too much? Does the universe think I'm a little spoiled or selfish? I do. I have those things creep in. And when I imagine like fully leaning into this growing edge and really being the person who not only like consciously believes that's true, but like knows it and feels it, I feel such an expansive, powerful, stretchy feeling. And I think also not only is it like stretchy and does it feel good, but I really want that to be true. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I fear that it might not be true, but I want it to be true. If this is true, it's the most expansive thing I can think of. So it's like, I can see the way that if this is true and I energetically embody this, I can sense how big of an impact it will really have on my life.
So once you've done the work of identifying your growing edge, like you have, Michelle. The final step of this process, step 5, is to identify your 1 to 3 next best steps from this place, from the energy of your growing edge. So now's the time where we turn this awareness into forward movement. So this step is about naming and really claiming 1 to 3 next best steps, not from a place of pressure or urgency, but again, from this place of having done the deep inner work of alignment and connecting to the energy of where it is that you're going. So these aren't performative check boxes. Like, these aren't your traditional to-dos to close the gap, right? They're conscious choices that reflect who you are becoming. Let these steps be simple. Let them be honest. They might look like a boundary that you're going to set. It might be support that you're going to ask for. It might be an opportunity that's come up in your life to practice this new way of being, or like have this conversation, or show up to this event in this way, or whatever it might be. It could be an action, or it could be a choice. There's no right or wrong way to do these next steps. In fact, only you know the best next steps that are right in front of you. You cannot turn to a guru or a mentor or a book or a teacher to tell you what your next steps are. Only you know what the 1 to 3 next best steps are right in front of you that are in true alignment with the energy that you're calling into your life as you've named it in your growing edge.
Here's the step for me that as soon as I read the instructions for this step, boom, download my next best step right into the front of my mind. And I went, oh, like dropped in right there. And then the funny thing is I went, okay, what are some other steps? And a different part of my brain clicked on, and I started making a bit of a list of all of the things I needed to do. And I started realizing, like, this is supposed to be 1 to 3 next best steps. 1 isn't better than 3. 3 isn't better than 1, whatever, just a nice little range, right? And I was like, oh, I've got like 6 things on this list. Oh, and so I checked in with myself, and I was making a list of all the things that I should do and would be good for me. I decided to discard every other next best step that came after that one that dropped in my head. And it's not that those other things weren't good things to do. Maybe I'll do them. I probably will. They were lovely things that weren't far off. But for me, what's really important about this is that I know myself. And if I have all these things I have to do, I'm going to feel tight and constricted, and I lose the energy of being this person I want to be. I went back to just this one clear, powerful step that felt like it was like inspired, and the universe has just dropped in. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to do other things, but here is my one really powerful little next best step that actually feels like it will energetically move me forward to help close the gap. The thing that dropped in my mind was, okay, it's to revisit a bit of a daily manifesting practice. And it might sound like a thing to do, like a to-do, like something to put in my schedule. But what this actually means is I'm going to start carving out a little bit of time. Like, when I say like daily, I'm like a person who's very loose, like daily, but in a really loose way. I'm going to start carving out like intentional time to internally lean in to connect to this energy that I've put my finger on in this growing edge exercise. And I'm going to start like doing that in the energy of remembering how powerful it is to do that. You know, it's almost like my to-do is remembering that all the to-dos are less powerful than taking these moments to reconnect. And I had started doing that a little while ago. I thought, okay, here's how we're going to get to the end of our vision. Here's how we're going to finally arrive. I started doing a little bit of that, but I got off track. I dropped off. I stopped because there were other moments along this journey for us where there was actually real emotions I had to wrestle with. There was some like feelings and limiting beliefs and bits of grief that I had to hold space for and do a different kind of work. There was also moments along this journey that really did require us to actually do some more tangible bits of work. So there's been other moments when we've done this growing edge exercise where the next best step was an actual to-do. We had a season of a lot of to-dos. You had a season of a lot of to-dos. If anyone has ever seen Taryn's to-do list, oh my God. We've had a season, but especially you had a season of a lot of actual to-dos. And I've had seasons, and you've had seasons where closing the gap was really about holding space for the parts of us that were scared or feeling feelings. And there's no better type of next best step. It just so happens that this is what I've come back around to right now, which is sort of cool and interesting to see. My mind thought at one point, that's what I have to do. But my body told me no. And the universe told me no, there's other things. And just right now, in this exact moment, that's the most powerful thing for me to do.
All right. So that's the final step of this process, is identifying your next best step. So what small and aligned resonant action, 1 to 3, can you take today to begin closing that gap? So again, these steps are not about performance. They're not about urgency. They're about this devotion to the version of yourself that you're stepping into and that you're becoming. Okay, that is the growing edge exercise. That's the exploration. So we hope that this experience, this coaching experience that you had with us in the growing edge exercise, we hope that it served you in whatever way it was meant to serve you. And if you do want some more guided support to move through this exploration, I just want to remind you that there is a digital workbook linked in the show notes that you could access. So it's there to guide you more deeply through this growing edge exercise with space for reflection, for clarity, for integration. Come back to this tool, to this exploration anytime your vision feels clear, but the gap between here and there feels wide or unknown. This exploration is always here for you. I come back to this exploration all the time. Every time I want to put my finger on the growing edge to feel like I am not just actionably closing the gap, but I am like magnetically, energetically closing that gap. Thanks for tuning into the Mind Rebel podcast. If you're craving a space to go deeper into explorations like these, visit themindrebel.com to learn more about our flagship program, The Mind Rebel Method. Whether you're feeling the call to become a world-class accredited coach, or you're simply yearning to live a life more true to who you really are, this is where your next chapter begins.